There comes a moment in life that no one prepares you for. It's not dramatic. It doesn't arrive with warning signs. But one day, you notice it quietly, painfully in the way your child looks at you, or doesn't, in the way they interrupt your thoughts, or brush past your concern, in the way your voice no longer lands the way it once did. You raised them, held them when they were small, cheered when they stumbled and cried for them when they didn't call. You gave so much of yourself that you sometimes forgot to keep any for you. But now, it feels like the roles have flipped, and not in a graceful way. You're no longer their guide. You feel like a ghost in the room. And here's the part that no one talks about. It hurts. It hurts to feel invisible to the very people you once gave everything to. It hurts to wonder if you're now just the older one, the afterthought, the extra voice they'd rather tune out. But let me tell you something with all the gentleness in my heart. You are not invisible. You are not irrelevant. Your worth has never expired. And most importantly, there is something you can do about it. In this video, I won't ask you to fight, to argue, or to demand. I'll walk with you through 6 quiet, powerful changes, the kind that don't raise your voice, but raise your value. We'll explore how to reclaim the dignity, the presence, and yes, the respect that you still deserve. Not by reminding them of who you were, but by becoming who you are again. So I invite you, if you've ever felt overlooked, even by the ones you love most, please comment 1 below. If you've never experienced it, comment 0. I'd still love to hear your story. And if this message touches something in you, please subscribe and turn on the bell, so we don't lose each other in a world that too often forgets what truly matters. Let's begin. Number 1, respect begins where approval ends. There is something tender, almost sacred about a parent's desire to be loved by their children. And as we age, that desire often turns into a silent craving. We say yes when we want to say no. We adjust our schedule, our opinions, even our self-worth, all for the hope of staying close, of being accepted, of not rocking the boat. But here's the hard truth. The more we seek their approval, the more we unintentionally teach them that our needs don't matter. And respect, my friend, can't grow in a garden where self-respect has withered. Let me tell you about a woman I once met. Her name was Miriam. She was the glue of her family, the kind of mother who showed up early and stayed late, who remembered birthdays, packed leftovers, and rarely ever asked for anything in return. As her children grew older and busier, she tried harder. She said, "Yes, I'll watch the kids," even when she was exhausted. She agreed with decisions that made her uncomfortable. She kept the peace, and slowly, she lost her place. "I just want them to feel close to me," she told me once. But closeness without respect becomes dependency, not connection. It wasn't until Miriam stopped bending that her children began to notice. She started declining requests when they were too much. She voiced her opinions calmly, kindly, and without apology. She took weekends for herself. She even joined a writing group, and something shifted. Her children didn't pull away. They leaned in. They saw her not as the ever-giving background figure, but as a woman wise, dignified, with a full life of her own. So let me offer you this thought. You don't need to earn your child's respect by shrinking yourself to fit their world. You reclaim it by standing firmly on your own. Because when you stop asking for approval, you start becoming someone worth listening to again. And sometimes, the most powerful voice isn't the loudest in the room. It's the one that knows when to stay silent and still command presence. Let's talk about that in the next part. Number 2, the power of dignified silence. There's a natural impulse in all of us to explain ourselves, to raise our voices when we feel ignored, to repeat the same point in different ways, hoping that this time they'll finally understand. And when our children speak to us with sharpness, with impatience, or with dismissal, the instinct to correct them can feel overwhelming. But let us pause here, because respect, the deep kind, does not rise from arguments. It grows quietly in the presence of calm certainty. Dignified silence is not weakness. It is the language of those who no longer need to prove their value. When you respond to disrespect with anger, you give away your energy. You enter a space where your children feel justified not in listening, but in defending themselves. The louder your tone, the less they hear your heart. But when you stay composed, when you look into their eyes without flinching, when you speak less but hold yourself more, you become a mirror. And what they see, even if they won't admit it, is a strength they can't diminish. There is a kind of wisdom that only arrives with age. The wisdom of not needing to win every conversation. The wisdom of knowing that truth doesn't need to shout. The wisdom of choosing dignity over dominance. You are not here to fight for a seat at their table. You are the reason that table exists. And your presence, when grounded and gentle, reminds them of that more than any raised voice ever could. So when your children talk over you, don't talk louder. When they dismiss your words, don't repeat them in desperation. Instead, let your silence say, I know who I am and I will not be shaken. From that stillness, something beautiful can grow, a life where your emotional balance doesn't depend on their behavior. Let's explore that next. Number 3, detach with love, not with bitterness. One of the quietest forms of heartbreak comes from needing something that someone no longer offers. A returned call, a kind word, a moment of true attention from your own child. It's only human to long for closeness, especially with those we once held in our arms. But there is a difference between love and emotional dependence. And that difference defines how others treat us. When your peace starts depending on how often they call, or whether they praise your efforts, or how quickly they reply, you hand them the key to your well-being. Not because they asked for it, but because somewhere along the way, you forgot how to carry it yourself. And when they sense that even unconsciously they may begin to pull back, not out of cruelty, but from a quiet discomfort. Because the more you need from them emotionally, the less free they feel to simply be. It's a delicate shift, but an essential one. Choosing to love without clinging, caring deeply, without making your happiness their responsibility. You can still love them wholly, endlessly, and yet free yourself from the need to be needed. And when you do, something profound happens. You reclaim the space within you that was always yours. The part that knows how to find joy in a morning walk, a warm cup of tea, or the sound of birdsong without waiting for a phone to ring. This is not giving up. It's rising up. It's choosing inner fullness over emotional chasing. And paradoxically, that is when others begin to come closer, not because you asked, but because you no longer needed them to. And from that space of quiet inner strength, we now begin to understand something deeper, that the way others treat us is often a reflection of what we allow. Let's step into that truth together. Number 4, boundaries teach others how to love you. Respect isn't something you can demand, but it is something you can shape by the quiet strength of the limits you set. As parents, especially in the later years, we often confuse love with limitless giving. We say yes when we are tired. We stay silent when we are hurt. We let the little jabs slide, the interruptions pass, the disrespect go unspoken, all because we fear losing connection. But here's the truth that many realize too late. Without boundaries, there can be no true respect. And without respect, love becomes one-sided, not mutual, not sustainable. Boundaries are not walls. They're not punishments. They are invitations, a gentle yet firm way of saying, I care about this relationship enough to protect it. When you calmly let someone know, this tone isn't okay with me, or I'm happy to help, but I need notice in advance, or simply, no, I won't be available this time. You're not pushing them away. You're showing them how to value your presence. And while setting boundaries may feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you've spent a lifetime putting others first, the discomfort is temporary. The dignity it builds is lasting. Because once your children realize that you are no longer willing to be spoken over, dismissed, or used without thanks, they may resist, they may be confused, but eventually they will adjust, and many will grow. Boundaries don't break relationships. They refine them. They clear the noise and reveal who's willing to meet you with mutual care. You deserve that, not because you raised them, but because you are still a whole, worthy person in your own right. And once you begin to protect your worth, there comes another important step. Learning when to stop giving, especially when your giving is no longer received with gratitude. Let's explore that next. Number 5, give from wholeness, not from habit. There is a beautiful strength in being generous. It's what makes parents feel needed, useful, connected, the helping hand, the open wallet, the steady presence that always says yes. But when giving becomes your only language, and appreciation becomes a rare visitor, something inside begins to quietly wear thin. Because giving is sacred, but only when it flows from wholeness, not emptiness, not from fear of being forgotten, not from guilt, not from the aching hope that maybe, just maybe, if you do enough, they'll see you again. The truth is hard, but it's freeing. The more you give without being valued, the more invisible you become. Not because you are not worthy, but because you've taught others that your love comes with no limits, no need for gratitude, no pause for respect. Giving should not cost you your peace. It should not cost you your dignity. It should not become a quiet form of begging for connection. So here is a gentle invitation. Pause, ask yourself, am I giving because I truly want to, or because I'm afraid not to? You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to protect your time. You're allowed to give less and still be a loving parent. And when you begin to give more thoughtfully, from a place of inner calm rather than obligation, your energy changes. You are no longer the always available safety net. You become a person with limits and worth. And when your children see that shift, something inside them shifts too. They begin to appreciate it, to notice, to realize that your generosity is not a given, it's a gift. And perhaps they begin to give back. But giving less is only one part of the healing. The deeper transformation begins when you choose to fill your own life with joy, not as a reaction, but as a way of being. Let's walk into that renewal together in the next part. Number 6, create a life that radiates beyond them. It happens slowly. First, on your calendar starts to revolve around their needs. Then your conversations begin to center on their worries, their decisions, their children. And before you even realize it, your world, once rich with your own dreams and rhythms, becomes a satellite orbiting theirs. You become the listener, the helper, the one who's always there. And while that might have felt like love at first, over time something begins to fade inside you, and perhaps one day, you wake up and wonder, when did my life stop belonging to me? You see, being a parent is one of life's most sacred callings, but it is not the only one. You were someone long before you were there. And that someone, that deep, beautiful, curious soul still lives inside you. She's not gone. He hasn't disappeared. That person is simply waiting for you to remember her, for you to come home to him. Reclaiming your life doesn't mean turning your back on your children. It means returning to the center of your own story, not as a background character, but as the lead. Because when you start to live fully for you, something powerful happens. You stop begging for respect, and you start commanding it without even asking. Ask yourself gently, what brings me alive? What have I put on the shelf because they needed me more? What has been whispering to me for years? Come back. I miss you. Maybe it's music. Maybe it's painting. Maybe it's gardening, storytelling, traveling, praying, volunteering, reading, writing, or simply sitting on the porch with a good book and no guilt. It doesn't have to be grand, but it does have to be yours. You were never meant to live vicariously through your children. Your joy is not a reward they owe you. It is something you owe yourself, because your soul still longs to grow even now, especially now. And the truth is, when you begin to nourish that part of yourself, you become magnetic. Your children begin to notice. They ask, "What's she been up to?" They hear a new energy in your voice, a lightness in your steps. They see you not as the one who waits around for their time, but as the one who values her own. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more you center your own life, the more they come toward you. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but out of curiosity and admiration. Because they see a version of you that inspires them, not a version that disappears into their shadow. You don't have to post about it. You don't have to announce anything. Just live. Fully, gently, boldly. Let your days be filled with you again. Your flavor, your spirit, your choices. And in doing so, you send a quiet message to the world. I am not just here to support life. I am here to live it. You are allowed to pursue joy, even if no one joins you. You are allowed to schedule your day around what nourishes you. You are allowed to have boundaries around your time. You are allowed to shine, not because you need attention, but because you have light, and light was never meant to be hidden. If you've lost yourself in the roles you played for others, this is your permission to step out of those roles and step back into your life. No one else can do it for you, but when you do, the world, including your children, begins to respond differently. They begin to respect the boundaries. They see the richness. They recognize that you are not here to fill empty spaces, but to expand into your own fullness. And the respect they once withheld, it begins to return, quietly, naturally, genuinely, not because you asked for it, but because you became someone who radiates it. And as you begin to rebuild your life from the inside out, you teach others, especially your children, how to respond to you, not through lectures, but through the way you treat yourself. Let's explore that truth next. Number 7, you teach others how to treat you by how you treat yourself. There's a truth we often overlook, not because it's hidden, but because it's quiet. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't beg for attention, but it sits in the background of every relationship, silently shaping how we're seen, heard, and valued. That truth is this: you teach others how to treat you by how you treat yourself. It sounds simple, but in practice, it asks for deep honesty and even deeper courage, because many of us, especially as we age, begin to neglect the small rituals that once reminded us of our own worth. We rush through meals without savoring. We postpone doctor visits. We say, it doesn't matter when something clearly does. We dress in what's easy instead of what makes us feel alive. We let our voice shrink not because no one listens, but because we've stopped speaking with conviction. And slowly, others mirror us. They take their cues not just from our words, but from our choices. If you treat yourself like an afterthought, others will too. If you ignore your needs, so will they. If you quietly say, I don't matter, even without speaking, the world echoes that message back to you. But the opposite is also true. When you begin to treat yourself with tenderness, attention, and care, something remarkable happens. Others begin to rise to meet you at the level where you now stand. You don't need to wait for your children to notice you. Start by noticing yourself. Look in the mirror not with criticism, but with curiosity. Ask, what makes me feel nourished? What beauty still wants to be expressed through me? What have I postponed, believing it was too late? Because it's not too late. Not to take better care of your body, not to laugh more often, not to create something new, not to walk into a room with quiet pride, knowing that you are still becoming. This kind of self-respect is not loud. It's not demanding. It doesn't require you to prove anything, but it changes everything because it realigns the energy you carry. You see, people don't just respond to what you say, they respond to what you believe about yourself. And when you begin to live as someone worthy of kindness, of time, of space, others start to reflect that back. Not immediately, not always perfectly, but gradually the world around you adjusts to the tone you've set within. And your children, even if they resist at first, will begin to feel it. They may not say it out loud, but they'll sense the shift. They'll notice the difference in your voice, in your posture, in the way you protect your peace. They'll begin to understand that the mother or father they once thought would always say yes has discovered the power of no. Not as punishment, but as self-honoring. And here's something quietly beautiful. When you treat yourself with dignity, you give your children permission to grow into more respectful, present, and balanced people. You stop enabling and start inspiring. You don't need to become someone else to earn their respect. You only need to return to the version of yourself who remembers their own worth. Make time for what fills you. Dress for yourself, not for convenience. Take up space in conversations and in your own story. Speak up, stand tall, eat food that nourishes, rest when you need it without apology. Because these small acts of self-respect ripple outward. They teach others, without confrontation, what is and isn't acceptable in your presence. You don't need a lecture. You don't need to prove anything. You only need to become a mirror of the respect you wish to receive. And day by day, that mirror reflects outward, softly reminding the people in your life that they are not standing before someone desperate for approval, but someone deeply rooted in self-worth. And that is magnetic. And once you've reclaimed how you treat yourself, the next shift happens not in what you say, but in what you don't. Because sometimes silence is the loudest voice we have. Let's explore that next. Number 8, let silence speak. What words cannot? There is a kind of silence that aches. The silence of waiting for a phone call that never comes. The silence of a dinner table with one empty chair. The silence after a sentence interrupted. Unfinished, unheard. But there is another kind of silence, and it is this one I want to gently place in your hands today. The silence that holds power. The silence that speaks truth without confrontation. The silence that dignifies rather than punishes. You see, as we get older, we are often taught that we must explain ourselves, defend our feelings, make our case. But some of the deepest transformations do not begin with explanations, they begin with absence. Not angry absence, not dramatic withdrawal, but intentional stillness. There comes a point in every relationship, even with your children, when words no longer reach the heart, when repeating yourself brings only frustration, when pleading feels like a wound opening again and again. And in those moments, silence becomes your greatest teacher. Choosing not to chase, not to remind, not to explain why your feelings matter, not to ask for the attention that should have been offered freely. This kind of silence is not about shutting them out. It's about allowing space for truth to settle. When you step back, with calm and grace, you give them room to notice what was once taken for granted. They begin to feel your absence not because you disappeared, but because you stopped filling every silence with your presence. You stopped calling first. You stopped accepting being interrupted. You stopped showing up uninvited just to feel needed. And slowly, very slowly, something inside them shifts. Not always, not instantly, but often enough. They begin to remember your steadiness. They wonder where your voice has gone. And without pressure, they start reaching toward you not because you asked them to, but because your silence reminded them of the value of your presence. Silence, when held with dignity, becomes a mirror. It allows others to sit with themselves, to reflect, to reconsider, to reconnect on their own terms. And in that space, your worth is no longer something they debate. It becomes something they feel. But let's be clear, this is not silence used as a weapon, not coldness, not manipulation. It's the silence of someone who is at peace with themselves, who knows that they no longer need to beg to be heard, because they have finally begun to listen inward. This silence can feel unfamiliar at first, even scary, because we are so used to filling every gap with effort, with reaching out, with words. But once you begin to trust it, you'll notice something quietly beautiful. Your mind becomes less cluttered. Your energy begins to return. Your heart softens, not with bitterness, but with clarity. You are no longer trying to control the story. You are simply writing a new chapter, one where your peace does not depend on their behavior. And in this chapter, you are the anchor. You are the one who no longer reacts, who no longer explains, who no longer compromises your well-being just to keep the illusion of closeness alive. Instead, you let silence speak for you. And it says, I will not shout to be heard. I will not explain myself to be seen. I will not chase to feel valued. I am enough, even in stillness. This stillness is your gift. It is your protest without aggression, your boundary without blame, your wisdom without words. And maybe, just maybe, in this quiet space, your children will hear what your voice could never quite say, that your love remains, but your self-neglect does not. And once you've made peace with silence, what's left is something even deeper, the beautiful, brave act of reclaiming your own life, not as an extension of anyone else's, but as a radiant expression of who you still are. Let's step into that next. Number 9, reclaim the life that still belongs to you. Somewhere along the path of parenthood, many of us begin to believe a quiet lie that our purpose ends when our children no longer need us, that once they grow up, move out, build their own lives, ours somehow fades into the background, like an old photograph left on a shelf. But that's not the truth. It never was. Because your life, this life you are still living, doesn't belong to the past. It belongs to you, to the present moment, to this day, to this breath. Yes, you've given decades to your family. Yes, you've been the caregiver, the listener, the backbone. And yes, you may now feel overlooked, undervalued, even forgotten at times. But hear this gently and clearly, you are still here. And that means your life is still unfolding, still blooming, still full of meaning waiting to be claimed. You don't need your children's permission to begin again. You don't need their schedule to align in order for you to matter. You don't need them to validate your existence, because your existence is already valid simply by being. The most powerful act of healing, especially after feeling dismissed, is to step back into yourself with intention, with care, with joy. Ask yourself softly, what part of me did I put aside to be everything for everyone else? What dream did I silence so I could be the strong one? What activity once made me feel alive, not as a parent, but as a person? Now is the time to return to that place. Not because you are starting over, but because you are finally coming home to the parts of yourself that never stopped waiting. Start small if you need to. Rearrange your home to reflect you. Take a walk in the morning sun, not because it's productive, but because it's yours. Learn something new, not for usefulness, but for joy. Wear colors that lift your mood. Cook something only you enjoy. Sit in stillness and let yourself feel proud of how far you've come. Because the truth is, you are still a creator. You are still a learner. You are still a soul capable of love, growth, laughter, and purpose. And the moment you begin to live as though that's true, the people around you begin to see it too. Your children may notice the glow in your voice, the confidence in your decisions, the peace in your posture, and maybe they begin to wonder what has changed. Why does she seem more whole? Why is he no longer trying so hard to please? And in that curiosity, a new relationship begins to take shape, not built on guilt or obligation or dependence, but on mutual respect. Because a parent who is full of life again is a parent others want to draw close to, not out of duty, but out of admiration. You don't have to wait for anyone to give you permission to matter. You've always mattered, even in silence, even in stillness, even when your efforts were unseen. Now is the time to shine, not for them, but for you. Because the later chapters of life are not the leftovers. They are the pages where you write the part of your story that belongs only to you, not as a parent, not as a caretaker, but as a whole, radiant, becoming a soul. So take the pen and start writing again. Because when you begin to live in alignment with your worth, not chasing, not apologizing, not waiting, you become someone the world can't ignore. And now, in this final part of our journey together, let's return to where we began and see how far we've come. Do you remember how this journey began? We started with a quiet ache, that moment when you feel your voice no longer matters in the lives of the very people you raised. When you wonder, do they still see me? Do I still matter to them? And perhaps the most tender question of all, did I give so much of myself that I forgot how to be me? If you've ever whispered these questions in the privacy of your heart, know this: you are not alone. And more importantly, you are not broken. You are a soul in transition, not from relevance to irrelevance, but from seeking outside approval to rediscovering your own center. Throughout this video, we haven't tried to change your children. We haven't made a list of demands. We haven't raised our voices. Instead, we've gently returned to the one place where real change always begins: within, because respect, true, lasting, grounded respect is not something you can force into someone else's heart. It's something you awaken by how you live, how you speak, how you carry your own presence. And you've begun that journey. You've stopped chasing their approval and started honoring your own values. You've chosen calm over conflict, stillness over chasing, boundaries over burnout, joy over martyrdom, and life over waiting. That's not just healing. That's transformation. And here's the truth that most people never say out loud. You are allowed to reclaim your dignity, your time, your voice even now. Especially now. You don't need to explain why. You don't need to justify it with all you've given. You only need to look in the mirror and remember you're still here. You still matter. You are still becoming. And when your children begin to notice the shift, when they see you not as someone waiting to be needed, but as someone quietly shining in her own space, they will begin to adjust. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, because respect cannot be demanded, but it can be inspired. And you, my friend, are already doing that, simply by choosing yourself again. So let me ask you one more time, with gentleness, what part of today's journey made you pause the longest? Was it a sentence, a memory, a realization that you've been pouring from an empty cup for far too long? Please, or if you feel safe to do so, leave a comment below. Let me know what part of this message spoke to your soul. I read every single one. Your voice matters here truly. And if this video brought even a moment of clarity, a breath of calm, or a drop of courage, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss what comes next. Because our next story will go even deeper into the quiet, powerful ways we heal, ways we grow, ways we become even more whole as we age, not less. And I want you with me on that journey. You see, growing older isn't about fading. It's about refining. It's about becoming the clearest version of who you've always been. And in that clarity, you will be seen. You will be heard. You will be respected. Not because you fought for it, but because you embodied it. So until next time, may you walk with your head high, your heart open, and your life full of quiet light. You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. You are still becoming beautifully.